Thank you again for joining us tonight, and I'm pleased to introduce our expert speakers, starting with Mike Menu and Blaise Aguirre. Mike is a co-founder of the Sash Bear Foundation, helping to reduce the stigma and bring great programs like the Expert Series and Family Connections program. We also have Blaise Aguirre, a child and adolescent psychiatrist and an associate professor of psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School. He is a trainer in and specializes in dialectical behavior therapy, as well as other treatments for borderline personality disorder and associated conditions. Dr. Aguirre has been a staff psychiatrist at McLean Hospital since 2000 and is nationally and internationally recognized for his extensive work in the treatment of mood and personality disorders in adolescents. He is the author or co-author of multiple books, most recently, I Hate Myself, that he shared with us in January. Welcome, Blaise and Mike, and I'm going to pass it over to you for this evening's session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Team Sash Bear. And what a wonderful opportunity it is to be with you. And what an unusual situation this is. A couple of months ago, I had the just remarkable opportunity to meet Sophie, who, is beloved to many, many of you. And in a different kind of context. And I met Sophie in a retreat and just like loved her curiosity, spirit, hiking ability, even in sort of higher heels. When we left the retreat, she had told me a little bit about her book, and the retreat was up in the mountains of Colorado, and I remember thinking, what am I gonna? It was really snowy, and it was going to take me a couple hours to get off the mountain. There was no Wi-Fi or radio reception, so I downloaded her book, and I have to say, I mean, I was a tiny bit skeptical at the time because it's sort of interesting when people who are not directly in the field write books that have to do with the way that the brain works. And the power of connection and things like that. And I have to tell you, her book Closer Together was mesmerizing. I mean, at one point I nearly drove off the road because I was like, wow, that's a really, really good point. I need to like think a little bit more about that. And it both safely and nearly unsafely got me off the mountain. And I actually finished the book by the time I got to the airport. And I thought, what a remarkable book it was, and the number of experts that she'd interviewed, and also the vulnerability that she had in just like discussing some of her own mental health stuff. And so it was just with great gratitude and honor that to have Sophie on today, and maybe we can just jump right in. And Sophie, this is your first book. What got you thinking of writing this book? You could have written so many other books given your position. Why this book?
So Blaise, do you think you're getting away, first of all, starting the evening telling people that I was in heels in the mountains? Can you clarify that I was in hiking boots with a heel, but there was so much snow that it was a bad idea? Just saying.
That is true. Sometimes I exaggerate for effect. So
right.
Yeah, but nevertheless, you kept up a good pace. Like even it didn't matter,
No, it didn't matter. You're very right. I just want to say thank you for the kind introduction. When all the lights are off and I don't get introduced this way by a friend and somebody who I respect so much and who is so eloquent, but also very generous in your intro. Like when all of that is off, like who's left? Who's Sophie? Maybe not the person that you see in pictures as the non-official first lady or whatever, right? I would like for us to meet tonight without all of that and without our identity related to roles and titles and whatever it is that we do in our lives, but to meet as human beings. And that's the reason I wrote the book, Blaise, to, when I launched in Vancouver in April 2024, my friend Dr. Gabor Mate was there and he introduced me on stage and we had a question to start with during the intro. And he didn't start with that question. And I'm like, where is he going? There was like hundreds of people in the room. And he said, Sophie, he says, this isn't your book. And I'm like, okay. And he said, this is your love letter to the world, isn't it? And I'm still emotional when I hear this now, because it is. Because my existence is linked to every other human being's existence, but because of the unique life path that I've had, everybody has a unique life path, but mine was unique to me. And I've been exposed to so many different life situations. And I fell in love with humans at a very young age. I'm an only child, so I had to go towards others in order to get to feel nourished, right? So as I went on in my life and learned and fell flat on my face and suffered from eating disorders and took in all the tensions from, addictions, and my family members had addictions. And so I internalized all of the pain, and I didn't really know what to do with it. And so when I realized that if I was going to stay closed in with my pain, I would go nowhere, I started my healing path. No human being is broken. We've been told this. It's not true. We come in with a pure soul. Life happens, right? And suffering is part of life. But there's a difference between suffering and trauma, and that's constriction. It's closing in. It's holding the pain inside and feeling that we're the only ones, going through a trauma. So we're all one trauma away from each other. It takes one dramatic life event to change the brain, to change the mind, to change the way you perceive yourself and others. So we're really not far from each other when it comes to pain and suffering. So I wrote the book because I had access through the years to so many incredible experts. And I wanted people to realize that when you look at the state of the world, and it's easy to be disillusioned, depressed, really to see that there's nowhere to go. But there's an explanation to this, and we can get deeper into it tonight. And you're never alone on the path. So when I realized that I had all this, knowledge, expertise, and my curiosity as a student, but also, as a teacher, because I had started to teach what I was learning as well, I said I have to share this with as many people as possible, because belonging to yourself should not be a luxury. It is a human right. But we live in a society that hijacks our right to this beautiful solitude of what it means to be in silence with ourselves without feeling overwhelmed, and throws us into loneliness. And loneliness, as you know, Blaise and Mike and everybody listening, can be a killer. So the work that you do, Blaise, the work that I've done to write this book, and so many experts out there doing the same type of work in their own fields, is so crucial to keep our communities healthy, but also to know that we can trust in each other and believe that we'll be able to adapt to all the changes that we're facing as a humanity.
But I'm wondering, a little bit tongue in cheek, but at the same time, I mean, I suppose that every generation thinks that theirs is the one that's facing whatever of life's challenges are, whether the World War I generation, World War II generation, et cetera, et cetera. It does somehow feel like at this point in time, I mean, maybe every generation has said that, but like that the focus on mental health, on connectedness, it just seems to have elevated to more significant need. I mean, do you have so, and again, I don't want to get into politics, and to your point, you're a human being who's had human experiences, but at the same time, maybe have had the privilege of a global perspective. So from that global perspective, your perspective on the current need for more effective mental health, help and awareness.
There's definitely a sense of urgency, to answer your question directly. I mean, what I think research shows that about 50% of the population, especially in North America, are stuck chronically or for too long or for too quick and too fast in their sympathetic nervous system. So we have an autonomic nervous system in every human being, and we have a sympathetic branch and a parasympathetic branch. The sympathetic is your fight, flight, freeze, and your parasympathetic is your rest and digest. And you and I and everybody listening, during a day, we dance between both, right? It's normal. But because we live in a fast-paced, extremely fast-paced world, because we're more on screens and less connected as communities, because kids spend less time in nature and learning experiences at a young age, where the brain is learning from 6 to 10 from an experimental perspective, that is so important because it's low risk, low cost. You fall off your bike, you scorch your knee, you're fine. You don't have a parent towering over you saying, "Oh my God, are you okay?" Right? We used to be able to play more safely and to feel like we could experience things, whether it's falling off a tree or falling off your bike, that you'd be fine. And these are just two examples. But what's happening right now is that we're raising a generation where we're actually interjecting into that development and not allowing our brains to build the resilience needed to move into teenage years and adulthood with resilience. Because when we didn't build that, when we were falling off our bikes, and again, it could be 1,000 different other examples, then what happens when obstacles, suffering, failure comes into your life when you're older? The brain didn't learn. There is a universal neurobiological imperative to resilience as we grow in communities. And because we fragmented communities, we fragmented the individual at the same time. And apparently hundreds of years ago, when Leonardo da Vinci was exploring the human body, the anatomy with his colleagues, they asked the church for cadavers, right? For medicine purposes and scientific purposes. And the church would say, absolutely, take it. But there's one place in the body that they weren't allowed to search and to explore. Do you know what that is?
The heart or the brain?
The brain.
Okay.
The brain was left to the church. We could not, we did not have the opportunity or the okay to look at it from up close. So the good news here is that, think about brain research these days. It is exponential. We are living in an era of fast-paced lives, of chronic stress, of a sense of urgency, of climate change anxiety, of dislocation of human beings between themselves and their sense of belonging to themselves and to this world. So yes, there is a sense of urgency, and yes, every generation has their sense of urgency. But I think we're faced with a diversity of problems that is very unique to our generation and the generations to come.
Brilliant. So I'm going to pass it on to Mike. I mean, I just want to just say before we pass it on to Mike, and I've just obviously known Mike and Lynn for a very, very long time. Just like, I'm so in awe of just like what they've done, not, in Canadian and global mental health, but really just the significance of Sash Bear to me personally, to so many people who show up for the walk, and just Mike, you're I know Lynn's traveling right now, but to take it away, and thoughts and reflections. And I know that when you and I were going to speak, Mike, you said, no, not just yet. I'm only on page 200 of the book, and and that's you, Mike. It's like you're so thorough in your preparation, and I think you came up with some like really incredible questions. So over to you, my friend.
Thank you for that, Blaise. And I did put up a list. So after reading the book, at first I was saying, oh, what should I ask? There's so many things to ask. And I did come up with a big list. So I'm hoping just to get it with as many. One of the things that in the book that you talk about a lot is attachment theory, because that's really throughout it, really you bring it back. So for those people that don't know what that is, and I didn't really know exactly what that was before I read it, could you tell us a brief explanation of what attachment theory is?
With pleasure, Mike. Thank you. I was in awe of learning myself more, and Alan Shore is like one of the great fathers of attachment theory, who I interviewed in the book. But the fact that we don't teach this in schools is extremely concerning, because the universality, again, and our common grounds and denominator as human beings is the childhood bond of attachment. So what is the childhood bond of attachment? Very simply put, it is your pre-verbal years, so when you're not speaking yet. And it's the quality of interaction, of validation, of eye gazing, of presence, of love and care that you got from your parent, your caregiver, whether it's mommy, daddy, grandmother, auntie, doesn't matter. The adult who was, or the adults who were in charge of you. So usually we'll have secure, insecure, or disorganized bonds of attachment. Disorganized usually are associated with contexts of very complex and deep trauma. And if anybody is listening today, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And in the insecure category, we have the anxious and the avoidant. So I have a tendency to be anxious. So usually that could only mean that, you know, mommy and daddy were very, they were there, they loved you, but they were very busy. And they weren't always there to provide the quality and the consistency of care. And then, you know, the avoidant could be the baby, for example, who was left on its own a lot because mommy and daddy were very busy with other siblings. And it's not that it's directly negative, right? But it could be that when we describe safety, what is emotional safety? On Abraham Maslow's pyramid, if you don't have emotional safety, it's game over. So safety is not just the absence of a threat in your life. It is the presence of connection. So think about the baby who comes, the little child in you, right? Everybody listening right now, just think about the little child in you. You come into life and you're looking for validation. You're looking for connection. We human beings are meant to connect. Just for fun, Mike, if you had a very, you know, stressful day, or you were going through a very difficult time and you were in your sympathetic nervous system right now, in your fight or your flight or your freeze, and I came on with a neutral face, you could interpret, because of your state, my neutral face as aggressive or threatening. Think about the state of the world right now. So if in your childhood, there's something called, I'm not going to complicate it for no reason, but it's called epistemic trust. And it's the kind of trust that was built from the beginning that left a symphony, like a little type of dance from right brain, which is your emotional brain, to right brain. So it happens right brain to right brain with your caregiver nonstop, all day long. And when they wake you in, you know, and when you wake up in the night and when they take you in their arms, and let's say, you know, your mom fed you the bottle or the breast, and she would look at you or not look at you. So all the eye gazing, all the play is super important. The humor, there's many tests in psychology that, and there's a famous one that maybe Blaise would remember, but where the mother stops eye gazing into the baby's eyes when he's in his high chair. And the baby at first, okay, will like focus on something else. And then he's trying to get her attention and then he freaks out. Well, that little child in all of us is still active in every single human relationship that we have today. And in the book, when you read the book, you'll just realize how ingrained that is in us, but also how malleable as babies we are to change. So we don't have to be fixed in our personality. We can also be open to changing and evolving as human beings, mind, body, and heart.
Right. So with that, I think I think you kind of address why is it important to understand that, because it basically shapes all the relationships thereafter, or influenced or impacted by what that relationship was like from these early years. In terms of, and obviously between teenagers and their parents, this is also something that happens with that. And going to that, in your book, you talk, I mean, you do have two teenagers and one getting close to it. So like, kudos to you. It's really hard. So you talk a lot about parenting in your book, and you talk about a lot of that. So I just want to ask you, so as a parent, what have you found that was the most challenging aspects of raising children from your perspective?
That's an interesting and a big question. I might take you on a territory that seems like, where is she going with this? But let me tell you my truth. I think the most challenging part when we raise children is to make sure that we look at our trauma as a parent, is to make sure that we start parenting from a more conscious perspective. Therefore, the child's behavior, their reactions, their needs, their ups and downs, and I'm talking about the teenagers, they become a little bit less threatening, right? Destabilizing, when you have dealt with your own pain, your own trauma. This being said, a lot of parents have dealt with their own pain and their own trauma and are still struggling. And by the way, I don't have it all together at all. I still have my ups and downs as a parent, right? But the thing is, parenting is not a role, it's a relationship. And Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who's a great child psychologist, in the book that I interviewed, said, you know, we've lost the capacity to deeply listen. And this is why sometimes grandchildren really love to be with their grandparents, because it's not about go clean your room, go do this, go do that, which I ask my kids all the time. And apparently, after 17 years of raising them, it's still not done, right? So I think we tend to see ourselves as adults fulfilling roles when we should be in interaction, fully present with our children. And that's tough because a lot of parents, are struggling to reach the end of the month, with rent, or there's so much stress in their lives. And with social injustices and marginalization of vulnerable groups. So we're looking at a very complex system with simple equations of relationships, but complex solutions too. So all this to say that I think my most challenging part of being a parent is that it triggers me in parts of myself that need to be looked at. That's really what it is. And I learn from my kids. They teach me lessons. I remember once one of my sons telling me, "Well, Mom, I'm not like you. I'm not like you, and I don't want to be like you." And I was like, yeah, that's actually okay, right? The teenager needs to become who they are and always feel loved at home so they can actually differentiate and not feeling that they have to still perform to be loved. So I think a lot of us as children lose our authenticity very early. We live in a society that keeps rewarding us for self-betrayal. Change your face, change your body, change the way you perform, change the way you define success to fit in a mold and in a culture. And when we lose authenticity, which is your capacity to actually express who you are without having to change your behavior to please. Hello, we all do it. We all do it. We do it as children to get our parents' attentions, and we do it as children, as adults, in loving relationships and friendships, as coworkers. We all do it. So it's a delicate system where when we're too much in resistance mode or trying to fit in, we're actually hurting ourselves. So self-love is the most difficult act of rebellion, I would say, and wise defiance. And I think actually Blaise could maybe add something to that at some point, because he wrote a book about self-hatred.
One of the things that struck me was how vulnerable and how comprehensive you were, and sort of like talking about your own mental health struggles, and specifically like an eating disorder. And I think, one thing is to say, when I was a teenager, I was depressed, and I was put on meds and had some therapy, and here I am and talk on. But you actually got into quite a lot of detail. Why did you think it was important to be not only as vulnerable, but just like as open as it was with just like what that was like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I wasn't always open, Blaise, right? Like it took me many years of suffering through the eating disorder. And just by the way, I'm going to ask you a quick question, and you can answer this if you want to, Blaise, or keep it to yourself. And for everybody listening, what is a temporary habit that you have that provides you quick relief, feels great in the short term, but that in the long term can be detrimental to yourself or to people around you? So think about something right now.
I'm really good now. I'm just like, I'm fabulous. I'm healed.
Uh-huh. Well,
I mean, and I have to think a little bit about this, but I think I like solitude. But at the same time, like sometimes, it can be a way of hiding as well. So I mean, it can have its benefit, but I mean, when used in a certain way, I mean, am I hiding?
so somebody said like spend money. Yes, that's
Yeah.
absolutely. So the question that I asked all of you is the definition of an addiction. So we all have micro habits of addiction. And when you look at addictions, we shouldn't even look at the drug of choice, at the addiction itself, whether it's shopping, money, relationships, sex, drugs, whatever, crack, or pot, whatever it is. Don't look at the addiction, look at the pain underlying the addiction. So I wasn't always vulnerable with others when it came to my pain. I didn't even know how to put words on it. Where did it come from? And so at some point, I remember suffering so much, I was trembling because there was too much purging. And everybody, while I'm talking right now, are talking about their own addictions, you know, eating, social media. Yes, they're all forms of micro habits or macro habits that can turn into addictions. And the most fascinating thing that I found by sharing my story is that is the beginning of healing, is telling your story, is opening up. And personality and every behavior that you have in your life, every gesture that you'll ever have, is an attempt to love or to be loved. We are human beings seeking connection. So if somebody is screaming for help, if somebody is cutting, if somebody is eating too much, if somebody is jumping from one relationship to the other, those are all cries for human connection and nourishment that is not taking place appropriately. You know, emotional maturity is to be able to discern between your desires and your true needs. And needs are fine. We all have needs as human beings, but we confuse them with what feels good, right? Happiness usually will secrete dopamine, which feels great, incentive, reward, and contempt will be more related to relaxing hormones. And in a society that keeps us in a dopamine nation, that keeps us always high on dopamine, the relaxing hormones are becoming boring. That's quite a pickle we're in, because it means that being in fight, flight, freeze is actually entertaining. And what happens when we're in fight, flight, freeze for too long? You know this. The body says, I'm done, shutting down, depression, and more. So, although there are very, complex situations, there is a more simple angle to look at human beings and the universality of pain. And again, don't forget that the difference between pain and suffering is constriction. One of my favorite poetry quotes from Rainer Maria Rilke is, I want to unfold. Let there be no space inside me hold itself closed, for where I am closed, I am false. And this is fascinating because we think we are our personality, right? It's very reassuring to say, I'm an extrovert. I love people. I'm an introvert. Don't want to be with people too much. I'm this, I'm that. We all have our refuge. Mine is doubt. Some people is intensity, running marathons nonstop, or jumping
Mike,
from
you're
one
running
relate.
marathons?
No, you are. I'm just teasing. We tease the ones we love. So we all have a refuge. And if you're listening right now, maybe you want to think about your refuge. Mine is doubt. What does a refuge serve for us? It validates our pain. So when I'm doubting and I'm going, I'm not good enough. Am I really going to make it? Are things going to be okay? Am I going to be left alone? Well, that validates and that tells me, poor baby, like you're really suffering. This is hard, isn't it? So I like to stay there because it validates my pain. But does it serve me? No. So it's very common sometimes in therapy. So my refuge is chaos. Yes, exactly. But also, chaos is one example. You and other people are thinking about their own refuge. What we knew in childhood becomes our emotional home. Therefore, when we judge, for example, a woman who gets, is a victim of domestic abuse, well, what do you know if she wasn't beaten up in her own home when she was younger? And that becomes a refuge and it validates your pain and it becomes your emotional home. And you actually start to believe that you're not worthy of anything more. Actually, anything different feels weird because it doesn't feel like home. So we should be so discerning as parents, as colleagues, as friends and mentors, and just citizens to not judge our suffering from afar and looking at each other because we're all one trauma away. We're just one trauma away from each other. And I try to raise my kids that way.
So just to follow up on that, because you talk about that early the attachment theory, and you talk about those early experiences. And one thing that I didn't hear you do is blame your parents, like, that, I mean, because I think we can get to the state like, if my parents had done this, this, and this, I wouldn't have done this, this, and this. And so I think that you had a lot of like, you talked about growing up on the farm and just like, like not, I mean, I think that the reason you wore those high heel hiking boots is because you never wore shoes for this first 10 years of your life. And, and not knowing what shoes were, so at the same time, so like, you could point a finger and say like, my parents should have picked up on this, but what if you could go back in time? And I mean, we're not going to change the things that weren't, but what would you have wanted your parents to have known at that time that would have been kind of maybe more helpful for you?
Wow. Okay, so first things first, I have blamed my parents. I have learned that it only works for a little while. It's not the answer. Okay. So I'm not perfect. And I have gone through that that kind of process at the beginning. What would I have, what I realized is that parents from generations that came before me didn't know that from an energetic point of view, from how they treated each other, from how they interacted with each other, there's an energy load in a room without having to talk. My father didn't know how to deal with me when I started to be more independent, and I felt completely left alone emotionally. I loved him, he loved me, but I felt completely abandoned, and I talk about this in the book. And I think that parents should be very aware, even though, you're not fighting, but you're really mad at each other. You're not talking, but you want to, like, not even be close to the person beside you. The tension that is held in the family environment is palpable, noticeable, and picked up on by children. So I think that's something that we can't run away from, the work that we have to do in our own relationships, because when we run away from that work, it is felt in our sensory bodies by our children.
That's a really great point, and I'm wondering. So, for example, for those parents that have those regrets now, and you can't change the past, obviously, you can't change what you did. So, what do you think would be useful for them to do with their children now to try to somehow repair and maybe open up a new relationship style with those children, give them maybe what they were missing?
I love what you just said. First of all, don't get me wrong. I still think that I missed on some pieces, right? And I've been doing this work. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes as a parent, and I do have regrets. But holding on to guilt, or shame, which runs even deeper, is toxic. It's completely toxic. So what we can do as of now is to heal ourselves and to get rid of the guilt and the shame. So that's the first step of the work. And then it is never too late to repair. It's always better to repair when a conflict happens. But, there are many experts out there, including Blaise and Gabor and many other people, who are actually repairing adult, child, and parent relationships. Meaning that the relationship was so bad for so long, but because the brain is plastic, and because, neurons that fire together, wire together, with repetition, with presence, with emotional safety in each other's presence, it is possible to reset. And in the book, I interviewed Dr. John Gray on one of the greatest tricks that I have learned. It's called CPR. So it's not mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, okay? It's catch, pause, repair. So let's say you're about to fight with your child, okay, and you feel your heart pumping faster, you feel your face becoming flushed, you're trembling a little bit, you feel the anger coming up, and you feel you're going to lose it. Happens to everybody. Then you catch what's happening in your body first. Oh my God, my body's talking to me right now. So you're actually a conscious human being knowing what's happening in your own anatomy. Then you pause. Okay, before I lash out and lose control, and we all do. Don't feel the guilt right now and when I'm talking, because we all do, but we repair them. So, and then you pause, Now, that part of pausing is important that we talk about, because do we know what quick exercises we can do with breathing, with vagus nerve resets that I could teach you at the end of the session? Maybe we can do 1 or 2 together. Coming back to calm inside of your own body. All of your red flags of anger are slowly calming down. And then repair. Catch, pause, repair. Repair is not only an apology. Apologies are not enough. We need to be listening to one another. And one of the great lessons that I've learned while writing this book is you cannot regulate 2 brains at the same time. When you're in a conflict with somebody, coworker, child, whatever, you have to let one person talk for at least 10 minutes. The brain needs at least 10 minutes to come back to safety if it was in distress. So one person talks, the other one has a reassuring face on, right? No judging, no criticizing, no suggesting, no commenting. Hard work, I know, but it's possible. And then you let the other person talk. You become the talker and the other becomes the listener. You know, some people say that it's really good to lie down on the ground because the brain feels like, okay, there's no saber-toothed tiger, there's no real threat in the room. I heard an acronym for the word fear recently that says false events appearing real. And when you're stuck in your sympathetic nervous system, in your fight, flight, freeze, because of all the conditions of life that we live in, and all the trauma and all whatever, you perceive non-actual threats as threats. And that comes back to my neutral face, that if you were in your distress mode, you could interpret as aggressive or threatening. So this will affect the way we interact with people. It will affect the way we vote. It will affect the way we decide to bring our attention to one object or information or another. And our micro habits will either feed the good wolf or the bad wolf. So it's really about, baby steps on our way to healing. And especially as parents, letting go of what we didn't do right and focusing on repairing, because the opportunity is there.
Yeah, and what you just said, like it talks a lot about being mindful of
Yeah.
what's happening in that moment. And that's where mindfulness is not easy, right? But as you say, if you really stop and listen, and like you can notice the urge to say something, the urge to rebut or not really agree, and tell them, you can notice it and let it go and say, no, I am listening. That's what I'm doing now. So it's like a mindfulness listening to the person. So that would be so that comes to mindfulness. Blaise, on this, did you want to add something to that? Otherwise,
No, I'm actually interested in your mindfulness question. I did want to just one thing, because one of the techniques that you talk about, Sophie, is actually very nonverbal, and that is the practice of yoga. And I have to admit that I was terrified when you suggested, we were up in Colorado, that we were going to go and do some yoga. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, because the idea of stretching in unfathomable ways was but yoga is not verbal. I mean, there's not a verbal thing, and yet you use it as one of your techniques. And Mike is going to ask about mindfulness in a little bit, and there's mindful yoga, but I suppose maybe somebody could argue that all yoga is mindful. But can you talk about that, the physicality and yoga and other elements like that maybe you use in your life to sort of ground your central nervous system?
Absolutely. We forget that the body tells us first what's going on, not your emotions. The body tells us first. So if I'm listening to my child who's screaming because, I don't know, I said no to going to a party and he's not happy, okay? And he's going at me, or he's, he hates his parents, we all hear those things, when teenagers are angry. If let's say I'm holding on to my jaw like this, and I'm tensing up in my throat, and I have my eyebrows like this, and I'm just clenching my fists and my teeth, I won't be able to receive the emotion of my child with detachment and maturity. So I would say that emotional maturity is actually our capacity to sense our bodies first. So very often, I'll be triggered by something that somebody says or an action that somebody put forward, and I notice that I'm clenching. So I'll take a couple of deep breaths. I'll close my eyes. I'll inhale through my nose and I'll exhale out the mouth, like, really letting it out for a couple, I would say sometimes like 30 seconds. 30 seconds in our day when we are scrolling for hours on our phones. These are little exercises that are applicable to daily life, that they're not perfect, and you're not going to get the perfect result, but you're going to change the process. You really are. And I don't know, like, when we're ready to maybe try a vagus nerve exercise, but I think it would be important to talk about our vagus nerve. Is this the right time, Blaise and Mike?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So the vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in the human body. Every human on this planet has one, and it runs from the brainstem down, near the face. It innervates the face because vagus nerve. Vagus means wandering, because it goes everywhere in the body, and so the throat region, the upper chest, all are surrounding the organs in the lower abdomen. And it regulates so many functions in the body, including heart rate, digestion, pupil dilation, salivation, name it. And it's unbelievable to learn that most of the messages that occur and are exchanged between your belly and your brain, so brain in the head, brain in the heart, nervous system of the heart has a capacity to predict negative events. So when you say, oh, I should have listened to my heart, right? It's actually true. And then the brain and the gut. The brain and the gut communicates and sends signals to the brain 75% of the time. So the gut communicates more with the brain than the brain communicates with the gut. And we've been separating all these entities, and we wonder why we're disconnected from our bodies. So the vagus nerve can be affected in different ways, whether it's through, let's say just taking both index fingers and taking the ears down and pulling on the inner ear down for a couple of seconds. So that's just one of them, while you release your jaw and you release the space between your eyebrows. So that's one exercise. Another one would be taking your index and your middle finger behind and in front of the ear and simply massaging a little bit here. Even massaging the jaw can help. And then another one that I really love, if you're sitting right now, you can, first of all, trust me while I lead you through this exercise. I've led hundreds and hundreds of students, and let's see how you'll feel after a minute of doing this. So if you're sitting, great. If you're lying down, that can work too, but it's better to be seated. So make sure you're comfortable and that your feet are in touch with the earth. And make your lower body really heavy, like sitting bones heavy, hips heavy, thighs heavy, knees, calf and shins, really, really melting into the floor. The top of the foot and the back of the foot in contact with the earth. And change nothing in your lower body, heavy, like a rock in a riverbed. And feel the upper body lighter. Pull and melt the shoulders away from your earlobes. Relax your jaw. And relax your jaw even more. Relax the tongue and the mouth. And from here, we're going to take 3 breaths through the nose together and out the mouth. So inhale through the nose, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sigh it out the mouth. Again, inhale nose, 4, 3, 2, 1. Make more noise, exhale. Nice. Again, 4, 3, 2, 1. Through the nose, exhale out the mouth. More noise on your exhale. And the last one, inhale, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. Now from here, open your eyes if they were closed and look right on your inhale. Exhale to the middle. Look left over your shoulder on your inhale. Exhale to the middle. Again to the right. Inhale. Exhale to the middle. Inhale left. Exhale middle. Roll the shoulders back get any kinks out of the neck or shoulders. And front. And finally, we're going to inhale the right arm up to the sky. Inhale your right arm up to the sky. Place it on the left hand side of your head. So your head is leaning towards the right hand is on the left side of the head. You tuck your chin in a little bit. Notice that you're not restricting your breath. Just let yourself be breathed. And relax the space between your eyebrows. And feel the stretch in your neck. And see how patient you are here. Stay exactly where you are and simply gaze with both eyes to the opposite corner of where your head is leaning to. Both eyes gazing softly to the opposite corner of where your head is leaning to. A couple of seconds here. Stop thinking. No thinking. Just sensing. Is there more salivation? Is there a natural exhale or sigh? Do you want to yawn? Are you being critical? Let it go. You have nothing to perform here. We're just doing this together. Just being present and tender with ourselves. And on your next inhale, come up very slowly, being careful with your neck. One breath in and exhale. And roll the shoulders. And now we do the other side. We inhale the left arm up to the sky. We place it on the right-hand side of the head. Head goes towards the left. Feel the stretch in the right side of the neck. Relax your jaw. Relax the tongue and the mouth. Relax the forehead. Both eyes gaze to the opposite corner of where your head is leaning to. So choose a spot and bring both eyes there. Notice any body sensations, anything at all. You don't even need to name it or judge it. Just notice. Just like a baby noticing a tree without even knowing it's called a tree. Just being curious with what's happening. And slowly coming back up, being careful with the neck and rolling the shoulders. And just for fun, stay super in the calm that you created and look right to see if you can go a little bit further over your right shoulder. And look left. And inhale one last time through the nose and exhale it out the mouth. And just for the next 5 seconds, just see if something changed. Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 10, 20, 30 or more. No matter what changed, did something shift inside of you a little bit? Now, these exercises are not difficult to learn. They're not difficult to apply to any situation. Whether you're at work or in your own home, it's possible to do them. You know, you can go into a restroom, you can go into a room or at your office, and you'll see that whatever you're feeling right now, for me, it's a sense of calm, of reassurance. I don't know what Mike or Blaise are feeling, or if people want to comment on what came up, right? Yes, a release. Yes, very much a release. Same here. So you would be now, right now, you have more space within, more lightness. You would be, and more flexibility, the great word. You will be more ready to receive somebody who is in distress without feeling distress yourself. So creating calm and creating more stability, more solidity. Exactly. I love the words that you're presenting out there. Spacious is feasible. It is possible. It is at arm's reach. It is at breath's reach. Our breath is our greatest tool to regulate our nervous system and to find peace within ourselves, and therefore not feel so threatened by the difference of others. So the body work is extremely, extremely important as we, maybe go into cognitive behavioral therapy, or, all the work that Blaise does as well is absolutely extraordinary. But we all know that talking with our left brain and our logical brain will not exclusively resolve the problems of the emotional right brain. It doesn't work that way. We have to be able to dance between both, and we have to be able to connect with each other as human beings, just like the caregivers connected with us, and get more nourishment. Thank you, Tony.
And actually, the mindfulness section, I think you pretty much cover everything I want, like how mindfulness and I guess the yoga part enrich your life. So
Yes.
maybe you can talk about the yoga part.
Yes. So I want to say to people, like, yoga is not about touching your toes. With time, you will touch your toes. With repetition and exercise, you will touch your toes. At 40, I started doing the splits. I was worlds far away from doing the splits in my 20s and 30s. Why? Because I was patient, because I was disciplined, and because I repeated the movements with breath and presence. It wasn't about performing, and I'm not perfect. Yes, sometimes it was about performing a new pose, and I was all proud to be able to do a new pose. But that is not yoga. Yoga means to yoke, to come into your true nature, to come into your authentic self. And the way to connect as easily and as so effectively with yourself is through the breath. So there are three elements of a yoga pose, which is called an asana. Okay. And the first one is alignment, making sure that you align your body safely, right? And that, you know, you're in the pose and that your body is well placed in the pose to not hurt yourself. Then there is breath, being present, going into the breath. Every time you do a movement, you inhale. Every time you do another movement, you exhale. So when I teach yoga, I guide a lot with breath cues so that you come back to being present. And finally, alignment. Think about relationships too. Alignment, breath, and letting go. Let the yoga do you. Once your muscular skeletal system holds the pose together, you're breathing properly and you're present, you let go. We are clinging to life, to youth, to each other in ways that we are trying to repair and to feel nourished. But when we're clinging and when we're too attached, it's because we haven't done the work of looking at our wounds of attachment and looking at our own, spots of suffering or of trauma that we keep closed inside of ourselves. So yoga is simply about being present. And you don't really have to do complicated asanas, postures, to be able to live a yogic life. They're observances of peaceful behavior, of nonviolent communication, of awareness and of consciousness. And there are two schools of yoga. One teaches you that the body is an obstacle to becoming enlightened. That's the Vedantic. Then there's non-Vedantic, which believes that the body is a means to enlightenment. And I believe the body is a miracle. I think it's Albert Einstein who said, you have to decide, either you believe nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle. And he believed that everything was a miracle. These are his words, right? And he's a scientific person. So at some point, letting go leaves space for uncertainty. And the human brain does not like uncertainty. And this is why we suffer. By the way, I don't like uncertainty either, right? Our human brain is meant to get away from danger and seek comfort. So when you come back from work and you want your beer and your television, that's the natural thing that your body wants, to get away from danger and seek comfort. But the little work that is needed to say, let me go for a half an hour walk. Then maybe I can have half a glass of wine watching something, right? It's all about balance. It's not about being, a Brahmin or whatever in a cave and meditating for 5 years. It's about changing micro habits to become more conscious of what's happening inside of yourself. So you move and trust into the world, and trusting human beings is the greatest gift you'll ever offer yourself.
Yeah, and I know in your book that they were talking exactly about that. That was a part that struck to me, to just take chances and do things differently once in a while, just to kind of push a little bit your comfort zone. And we have exercises. Some of the mindfulness exercises that we have in our groups is actually to show that change is difficult and that change is helpful too, that you learn to be able to adapt, and so you're just more adaptable and flexible in general.
It's unbelievable how with little changes, but that you repeat, your brain just really helps. And that's called, we all have a window of tolerance. how much we take in from people's other energy, how much stress we can handle in a day, how well we function on, X amount of hours of sleep, how we feel threatened by the environment or not. That is our window of tolerance. There is no way that we can widen our window of tolerance and be more resilient if we don't push ourselves physically and mentally. So there are ways to provoke and ignite good stress in our lives through movement, through meditation, through hot and cold exposure. I mean, not all the time during a woman's cycle. I did want to say that because people are, talking about hot, cold. I've been doing this for years, but we have to look at ways that fit, you know, our anatomy and the way that we are in our nervous system right now when we start to want to change. But I don't want people to be feel overwhelmed by change. It shouldn't be overwhelming. It just takes a little bit of a leap and the net will appear, right? This is a Buddhist saying, leap and the net will appear. You're never alone on your path. There's always allies along the way. And you have a right to solitude. You have a right to solitude without feeling lonely. And the more you take care of your nervous system, the more you'll feel at ease in your silence. And that is a form of liberation.
Wow, powerful words. By the way, just a tiny little comedic break. One of the most interesting questions that have shown up in the chat, and I think, first of all, so much gratitude for you and Lordatry, just like, for the ideas that you're sharing. But the most interesting question, I think, is, can you post a picture of your hiking shoes? So, so anyway, I think that's hilarious, and maybe there's a brand there, Sophie, for you.
I have them. I think I have them downstairs. I'll
Well,
try to find them.
you'll have to post them on your Instagram. People can go to your Instagram and watch. So one of the questions is, and I realized when we were chatting about your sort of mental health work for so many years, and having sort of traveled certainly all around Canada, around the world, but just in terms of stigma, one of the things that I think Sashbear has done is really tackle the stigma of mental illness and the ways that people struggle, certainly being part of my professional career. What have you seen from your side in terms of the bigger challenges in terms of stigma and what gets stigmatized and what doesn't?
I mean, culture, right? I think that mental health gets stigmatized. I mean, I've traveled to Ethiopia. I've traveled to so many different places that deal differently with according to religious and cultural standards with mental health. I think unbiased education on mental health is crucial in understanding how we function. They say that in the end, we will conserve what we love what we understand, and understand what we've been taught. Education is key when it comes to mental health, but also knowing that we're all one trauma away from each other and knowing that we can create safety for each other, which changes the way that we perceive each other and our stories of suffering and our stories of trauma. I've become a better person by learning from other people's stories. And I'm sure, Blaise, you might have something to add to this. I've heard so many stories and walks of life and, human pain in my life. I realize that it's not so different from one another, and to all the lives that have been lost, bless their souls. And it doesn't need to go down that route. And nobody should have to suffer alone or in silence. And I think we're making great progress in Canada. I can only speak for Canada because of the mass injections, of funds and structure that have changed through the years. But let's be very clear. It's the first benchmark. And then we pile and we go up and up and up and up. And I know there's not enough beds, and I'm very aware of the situation. But they are hardworking professionals out there who are ready to create change. And I think that we have to start working in silos as well, Blaise. I think that your expertise should be shared with people around the world, and that goes for all cross sectors. And I think the more we share our stories as countries, that we have to learn from each other, that we shouldn't keep it to our own country. I think that's a very, very universal call to be able to share with other countries what we've learned, and how to implement structures that work.
Yeah, so true, and that's one of the things that we're very, like in Sashbury, we're very adamant about, to go out in international conferences, and that's for our point of view, is that actually the power that families can have
Yeah.
in actually being an ally to that, because families have the best chance of being the most percentage of the time with their loved ones that are suffering, because obviously professionals cannot be as many hours in the week than parents can, and parents can really make a big difference when they change, when they're actually able to learn what is it that their loved ones want, what do they like, what they don't like, and stop being judgmental, all these things like the CPR that you're saying. I think that listening part, being mindful about what is going on with the other person, despite all this noise, and say, ah, you don't care, get out of my, like, leave me alone. This is just noise. Like, how do we get through that and actually establish connection, which is what your book in essence is all about, right?
Yeah, and I think that what's incremental as well is to be speaking to families and parents with each other, because we think we're going through such unique situations, but there are thousands,
Yeah.
if not millions, of other people going through the same thing.
Yeah.
So share experience with other people. People are just waiting to feel validated in what they're going through, and I think that by telling each other those stories, we begin healing, really.
Yeah, and we're breaking the stigma by doing it, because
Yes.
it opens, so because now we get more and more, the chit chat is more that, oh, when you actually talk about your mental health, yes, there are going to be some people that run away, but in my experience, and I'm pretty sure it's been the same as you, very few run away, many come in and actually share their own experience. As you say, that it's so common.
The child wants to be reassured, and just so you know,
Yeah.
somebody says family is the cell of society. Yes, but just so you know, when I interviewed an expert on dehumanization on my in my book, David Livingstone Smith, he sits with criminals and people who commit atrocious acts, and we're not excusing that behavior. But he said hatred stems from a deep need for human connection that never took place. So there is a story to distress and criminality, and we'll exclude all the more like extreme scenarios here, but to be able to share our struggles will only validate that we're not the only ones going through this, and that the big emotions are human. They're not dangerous. Big emotions are not dangerous, but closing in on big emotions, that is where danger lies. That's different.
Yeah, there's a lot I remember hearing that about your book, that you need to make space for the emotions too. Otherwise, if you just bottle them, they're not going away. They're just kind of brewing inside, and then they kind of develop, and at some point in the future they're going to come out. So you need to basically allow your emotions to be processed and your experiences. Yes. Otherwise, you're not really getting the true recovery from.
And if I can just take 30 seconds, because somebody talked about men, and I just wanted to say this. Our boys should be able to cry safely. Our boys should be able to express their emotions. Boys are more fragile emotionally when they're very little than girls. Okay? Experts are studying this, and it's fascinating. When we cry, we have 3 types of tears. So the first lubrication of the eye is called basal. It's just like right now, your eye is sitting in some type of liquid. If a foreign object or a wind was going to come in, that would be a reflex tear. So you would tear up to protect your eye. The emotional tears are the only tears, if they were analyzed by chemists, actually they have been analyzed, to contain stress hormones. When we cry emotional tears, it's just going to make me cry. Oh my God. When we cry emotional tears and we allow ourselves to feel the sadness, we detoxify the body and the mind, because our stress hormones are being released. And I've heard world leaders, I'm not going to name them, who are leading people with fear and are igniting division between human beings, who have not been taught to cry, and were not allowed to cry in their family. And I was like, well, that explains it, right? We need to be able to process, and we need to let our boys and our men be vulnerable, because that's the biggest sign of presence and intelligence and awareness. And that's what we need more of in this world. We really do, on all levels.
And that's when the expression that comes, have a good cry, right? It's
Yeah,
true.
exactly.
And I can tell you from the grieving when we lost our daughter, it was like that. And it was like really tough. And when you cry, you felt better after for sure. And it's a cyclical thing, but after the cry, it does release this pressure. So as you say, this is just like the science is just proving what we kind of already known. Like for all the people that have done it, it does feel like
This being said, if you're crying for weeks and nothing else is happening,
yeah,
then you really need to seek for help, right?
right.
That could be related to depression or something like that. But let's remember that even with depression, depression is when you depress something, you close it in, you bring it down, right? So if the emotions don't rise up all while you're growing older,
Mm.
it will haunt you later on. So it's extremely important to be able to feel and to sense as human beings. And remember the exercise that we did today, it starts in the body. So be more cognizant and be more in tune with your own human body. It is your only tool.
Just Mike and Sophie, I mean, we could stay on all night. I'm just getting notification that we want to add some questions from the audience. And by the way, Sophie, you're getting tremendous amounts of laudatory comments, as I've said before. You're also getting some nominations for Prime Minister. So,
Not a
if
chance, people. Not a chance.
But okay, like one question is, so that one thing is to think about mental health, and that we're talking about the importance of it, but then on the other side of it is lack of access to timely therapy for youth and for their families. So we agree, like, yes, we're struggling, we need help, we apply, but then there's this delay when the people need it, and so do you have like thoughts about that?
I do, yes, I do, because I have people who are teaching in the police force, firefighters, nurses, health professionals. First of all, the fact that mental health, was only, and I'm sure you can attest to this, Blaise, in the medical, universities, mental health was a tiny, tiny chapter in your whole medical training, right? And it's being addressed now, but there's still so much more work to do. And I think that there's so many entities in our communities that could be trained basically with basics to detect, to be more aware of, to see the signs. And it's not like incredible financial necessities. It's really basic training. And when people will understand that there is no wealth without mental wealth, and that there is an economic equation to mental health and to having healthy emotional teams and organizations and communities and schools, we actually gain even in capital wealth, in money, because it's costing society billions to ignore mental health problems. So yes, there is an argument of richness in all the ways possible through connection and through money and means that we gain from investing and from educating with basic tools. A lot of people who are intervening with other people, who are in service or who are in emergency services or health services, school services. So I think we should really, really be focusing on that.
Okay, so we have another question, and that is that in terms of the reality of life, is that what happens if you're stuck in a job that creates so much stress and unhappiness on the one hand, and at the same time you need that job to provide for your family, etc. How can you settle your nervous system when maybe your job is the source of that kind of chaos?
Yeah, I guess that's the trickiest question of them all. But as we talked about our own emotional literacy and our own emotional nourishment and alignment, the way that we receive stressors, we will be much more fragile to stress if we don't do the work ourselves of calming our minds and bodies. So obviously, I don't know what the situation is at work. If it's toxic and there's abuse, then you have to absolutely denounce it and go talk to your people who are in charge and human resources, and do not hesitate. Do not hesitate to talk about it. But I also think that the way that we receive stressors vary according to how we treat ourselves, and through movement, sleep, nutrition, what we bring our attention to, because we become what we bring our attention to. And we have a tendency to ruminate as well. I've done that so many times. And then there's a place in your brain called the frontal striatal loop, and it's actually being ignited, and it's kind of like that little gerbil and its wheel, and it's really hard to stop unless you say, wait a second, I'm in my frontal striatal loop right now, and I'm in my little gerbil is running. I'm at least cognizant of it. What do I do to calm down? My boss is coming to scream at me. How will I receive it? Now, it is not for me to say accept it and just let things go by, but to be able to let go of certain stressors and say, not not my problem. Not my problem. I do my job. This is my responsibility. I will let the rest be as it is. I cannot control that other human being. They can only control themselves. But again, if it's a situation of abuse, then it should be denounced automatically.
Again, just like lots and lots of support for you, and yeah, I'm trying to find like more. Oh, this is interesting. So I see my brother's on from Seattle, and he's he's wondering about mental health in schools as like part of an ongoing curriculum, not just like a one-time lecture on depression, and maybe and again, I don't know what it's like in Canada. Certainly in the United States, it's not part of a curriculum. Thoughts on integrating mental health as sort of more of a curriculum in schools?
Yeah, I think we're slowly changing. It's very difficult. I can only speak for Canada, but I can tell you that in Canada, the educational system is a provincial jurisdiction, so it's different in every province. So it's very hard for the federal government, for example, to impose a curriculum. It doesn't work that way. So every province receives the funds to be able to manage their own education system. But I think that the more we do this awareness work, the more professionals are looking at what's happening, on the cultural mainstream sphere. And I try to do my best, but I'm not a savior, and I can't change everything all at once, although I would love to, is to continue to talk about this, to continue to try to create little workshops here and there into schools. And I've taught on a volunteer basis at my three kids' schools, to be able to see little human beings, whether they're 7 years old or 16 years old, and they're stressed out. And I swear to you, what I see in 30 minutes to an hour is unbelievable. The release, it is incredible. So I think that as parents, as teachers, as people who mentor young kids in one way or another, the role that we have to play to relax our nervous systems in their presence is the unspoken work that they catch up on.
One last question, and I think one that probably has plagued all of us as parents, as educators, as therapists, and it's such a complicated one. But just your take on smartphones and social media. It's a question that comes up so much, lots of things to think about. Just your thoughts on all of these applications and electronics.
So listen, you're gonna like me or you're not gonna like me on this, but this is what I sense. No screens, before 10 years old at all. Zero. Screens with regulations as of 10, like not no social media before 14, that's for sure. We used to have hours of possibility of having access to social media on our kids' phones until they turned 16, and then it was a battle. But I think that it's not too late to catch the ball, okay, that we lost, because change happened so quickly, and social media invaded our lives so quickly that we could almost didn't have the time to pivot. Some schools are now banning phones from classrooms. Yes, please, more of that. It doesn't matter if they're mad at us for a while, because everybody will benefit from more regulation, more ethics, more morality, and more support and encadrement, right? Support system around the use of social media. And, it's quite convenient for us parents, sometimes convenient, to let the kids be on their phones or on their screens, because it keeps them busy. and we can do our things. I get it. Like we're all guilty here. But I think it's really important to be a little bit more critical of how time really flies by in life. And we know this as parents, and how it's never too late to reverse a little bit and even propose new ideas to save our brains, really, to save our brains. And we were going to have to train our brains to think quickly with AI coming at a bulldozing speed. But the more we have the capacity to relax our minds and our nervous system, the more we'll have resilience and adaptability to be able to face all of these changes.
And the more we'll be able to have connections to humans, right? Because that's the other thing that we learn, like as before the social media age, we learn how to connect to humans from very early on when we're, and then this is really important. So when you think about it, if you calculate the percentage of time that now kids spend with other humans compared to what we did, is much less, and that has to have some impact, because then how do you learn how to effectively connect with others if you haven't kind of done your mileage?
And remember how we're wired for attachment, how we're wired for connection, and how eye to eye cannot be replaced. That's the only thing that reassures me when I think about AI. It cannot be replaced. A nervous system in front of another nervous system, by the way, even diplomacy is affected by that. We meet less and less as, politicians, and it affects the way that we resolve conflict. And there's a reason why there are mediators and in many types of different relationships and instances, is to create more calm in a discussion and in a relationship. So in a way, when we're face to face, I think we allow ourselves more healthy restraint and more empathy, because it's different when you have the person in front of you. It's just different.
One last question, which we said we would do. What would be in one or two sentences? What would be a thought for Canadiana mindfulness?
Canadiana mindfulness. I love this. Do not take for granted the richness of the diversity that we have in Canada. Let's work as Canadians to recognize the great advantage that we have, to have the educational level that we have, to have the economic stability, even in difficult times, and to have, most of all, the capacity to connect and to have each other's backs and hearts as neighbors, and to continue to feed that connection, and to not be fearful and feel overwhelmed by the winds of division, because we are not invincible in Canada to those winds. We are not, but we have everything it takes to do the work and to change our habits in our lives, to recognize the humanity in one another. And we have enough cultures and religions and ways of life here that can open us up to the actual planet. We are a microplanet on our own because we're so diverse. And I think that is a celebration of the human spirit and what we've been through as well as a country through the years. We don't have a story, like other people have in Europe or Africa, but we have a story of our own. And let's make sure we don't become complacent, and that we keep connected to each other and take nothing for granted.
Great. Thank you so much. That was fabulous. That was wonderful to listen in, and lots of richness shared with everyone. So thank you, Blaise and Mike, for your moderation, and a very special thank you to you, Sophie, for joining us tonight. We appreciate you giving us your time so generously. And if you'd like to follow Sophie, I know a lot of folks have been asking the name of the book and whatnot. So you can visit her website at www.sophiegregoiretrudeau.com. Thanks, everyone.